Hey guys, welcome to week 3, Dynamic Sketching Masterclass. For the first 2 weeks, we covered warm-ups, line, learning how to control the pen. Week 2 was organic forms, contour lines, and I had introduced to you the 5 forms, the 5 shapes. This week, week 3, we're going to be covering geometric forms, which will be basically cubes, the pyramid, and the cylinder as well. Basically, before we get into this, I'm hoping some of you guys know basic general perspective. In this class, in general, we eye our perspective, so we don't plot anything out. But I do want to go over general basic perspective so that you guys understand how to incorporate geometric forms. It doesn't really apply to the organic forms. You'll be eyeing a lot of that perspective, but what I put up here today, hopefully you can use. Basic perspective. Obviously, things are going to a vanishing point. So if you guys know your perspective, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. So just continue to listen on. But for you, those of you that don't know, first things first. Your horizon line. This is basically, whenever you look into the distance, you'll see a horizon line, which is the sea or the land or whatever. That is your landscape, basically. And any object that you see, let's take a geometric form, a box. Has to go back in perspective to give it depth. This is a one-point perspective. This is your vanishing point, horizon line, 1 point, perspective. I'm not going to go too deeply into perspective, but I just wanted to give you a general idea of how to handle it. 1 point. Other than 1 point, I just want to give you guys a description on 2-point perspective as well. And these two are the only ones you'll really need. 3-point or any kind of elevation changes, stuff like that, it shouldn't be a problem. Again, horizon line. Taking the same form, a cube, you want to do a 2-point perspective. So that means a 1-point perspective has 1 vanishing point. 2-point perspective has 2 vanishing points. So you're 1, 2. Perspective is a bit tweaked on this one, but if you change the elevation in different ways, you bring it up closer to the horizon line, the more or less extreme the box will look. The further you take it away from the horizon line, the more extreme and fish-eyed your perspective will be. So if we bring it in closer, then the more flush and straight on it'll be. This is the general idea of 2-point perspective. Things going back into vanishing points to give you depth. 1 point, 2 point. The general homework I want you guys to be doing this week is going to be boxes in perspective. Erase this real quick. So what do I mean by boxes in perspective? This one, you don't have to plot out as well. This you can eye your perspective if you like. The boxes all of them don't have to go to one vanishing point. They can go in different directions, but let me give you a quick example. I'm just eyeing my perspective. I'm not creating a horizon line or a vanishing point. I'm just understanding that these lines are converging into a perspective. I don't know where the perspective is going, but I'm just creating my own vanishing point, eyeing my perspective. I'm going to create another box. And when I say boxes in perspective, I mean a lot of boxes. You're going to start layering your boxes on top of each other. And again, these do not have to converge at one perspective, vanishing point. It can go in many different directions. And this is just an exercise for you guys to get a basic handle on just eyeing perspective using any other kind of forms. For right now, I just want to keep it to boxes, but you can use cylinders as well or any other shapes. Remember, this is supposed to help you develop quick draw, quick sketching. So we can't sit there plotting every single thing out with vanishing points and horizon lines. If you're in front of a client and you got to sketch something out for him in front of him, you can't sit there and have a ruler and do everything for him. You got to be able to just eye your perspective quickly, lay it all down, and make sure just visually it looks correct without having to plot everything out. Now you can get creative with this. You can change the scale. You can make tiny little boxes and have it grow into a spiral. I mean, you can make it free-formed. As long as it looks like these boxes are going in a particular perspective, you can have fun with it. And I'm telling you that, these boxes are in perspective, whatever, and it seems like it's very limiting, but try to think outside of the box, I guess, and be creative with it. It surprised me. I'll do a few more here. This is one of the homeworks I want you guys to be doing for this week. And I want 2 pages of this, boxes in perspective, and fill the entire page. It'll feel a little repetitive at first, and it will be repetitive, but that's where trying to think a little creatively, making it more interesting visually for you, is going to come into play. So again, some of these boxes are going into one perspective, some of them are going in a different perspective. But this is a good exercise to do. This is where your warm-ups, your line warm-ups are going to come in handy, especially using the pen and learning line control. So what I don't want to see is you guys kind of scratching your lines in and trying to find these forms. I need you to be more assertive and confident with your lines, which is why that line exercise was going to be so beneficial to you. And really put it down with some confidence. So none of that. When it comes to the composition of your pages as well, play with it. You can really, really make this diverse. You don't have to fill the entire page. If you have a page in your book, you don't got to fill the entire thing. You can make it a really interesting composition that flows from one line to the other, but that still goes in one perspective. Make it really, really neat. Play with it. Experiment. More than anything, definitely experiment, because just hitting to a certain level is not as good as pushing it to the extreme. I want to see you guys push it to the extreme. So it may sound limiting in terms of just being boxes, but you'll be surprised. You can do really, really interesting stuff with this, with these boxes in perspective. Going back to the basic perspective real quick. Now, this is not a perspective class, obviously, but I would like you guys to handle maybe a page of the perspective I was talking about, the 1 point and 2 point. So on top of the boxes in perspective where you're eyeing your perspective, for the first thing to try, maybe you should try doing a page of just general horizon line, a box in perspective. Do a couple of those, 1 point and 2 point. So that's the 2 point. This is the 1 point. And just do a page of these, just so you understand the basics of perspective, of vanishing points and horizon line, and then move on to something like this. Okay. There's another thing I wanted to handle for this particular week. This is all the geometric stuff. We had done the organic stuff the week before. We're going to get into a little bit more complex stuff now, and that's going to be about shadows, cast shadows, and form shadows. And you can actually apply it to this week's homework with the boxes in perspective, which I'll give you guys an example of. But form shadows and cast shadows are going to be very important in describing the forms of your shapes. Now, if we took any of these forms, whether it be organic or geometric, different color. Or even a much more interesting shape. And we do the contours just like from last week. We want to start to describe shadows. The first thing we'll hit is form shadows. So obviously there's light coming in from a particular direction. And this is where our other tools are going to come in handy. You have your toned paper. You're going to start using things like your markers and your highlights, which I'll get into a little later on. But just keep in mind of things like this. With form shadows and cast shadows, we actually want to use, for this week, just the pen itself. I don't want you to get into the other materials just yet. Form shadows. The form shadows just describe how things are turning. So if we have this shape here, the form shadow has a core with a simple ellipse like this. This is your core. So light is coming in this direction. Let's change this one too, so we have the same direction of light, so we can translate that a little easier. Your core, your core. As the light hits it, you have your core shadow, and as it turns back in, that's where the shadow gets a little lighter, because the light from the ground is coming back up and hitting it, so there's a bit more light coming in underneath. So the core is going to be your darkest point. Obviously, the hottest point is going to be where the light is directly hitting. And I'll probably have a little bounce light underneath. Now, the only thing I want you guys to practice this week, other than the boxes in perspective and basic perspective, is going to be with the form shadow and cast shadow, but we're not going to pay too much attention to the hot spots with the white or the bounce line. I just want you guys to understand just cores. Learning when a form turns and you have a core shadow, this will be your darkest point. So when you have your pen, keeping in mind of focal points and gradations, just like we had talked about from the week before about textures and all that kind of stuff, line work, you're going to still keep focal areas, whether it be at the front or at the back. So if you have your core shadow, let's say this is my core shadow here, and you want to start detailing, your darkest is going to be at the front. And as you progress back, you do less detail. And start to learn how to cross-hatch with those. So that means when you have your contour shapes, you're going to follow your contours. Your contours are the guidelines in terms of how to cross-hatch. You're following the direction of the contours. And I want you guys to take your organic forms that we had done and apply this. If you feel confident in that you've done your core shadows well enough, you can use your gel pen, your white, and go on top and hit it with a white if you like, just to experiment with it and try it out, just to see how it turns out. Be careful with the whites. With anything other, if any other material than the pen itself, you need to be very, very minimal about it. Now, I'm talking with just the white. It's just simple spot highlights, one or two spots. That's all you need. With the marker, if you're going to hit it with the marker in the core shadow, again, very minimal. This is only if you feel like you're confident in the step that you understand how to use the pen to describe form shadows. With cast shadows, it's basically the same idea in terms of the amount of pen you want, how are you going to cross-hatch. But let's say we have the same shape here. You have your core. Describe that core with your pen. Fill it in with the crosshatch. And that could just be a line describing the form like this. The cast shadow is going to be the shadow that your form is placing on the ground or on top of another object. But with this method, also with the pen, you're going to just cross-hatch your cast shadows. I don't want you filling in completely dark because it'll just flatten the image. The darkest point will be where the object hits the ground. So this will be your darkest darks in here. And as it progresses out, it gets lighter and lighter. So how would you cross-hatch that with the pen? Cast shadow. You could just do straight lines down as it goes out, less and less. You can go in multiple directions. As it progresses out, less and less. These are all exercises for you guys to continue to understand how to use the pen and get comfortable with it. So even these shapes in itself have cast shadows. Light's coming in this direction, there's a form shadow. That means there's a cast shadow being cast right on top of it. Now your form shadows are soft, which means you can start to cross-hatch and be a little bit more free-form with your line work, so they can follow your contours and then also cross-hatch in many different directions. when it comes to the cast shadows, it's a hard line because it's a cast shadow. It's what it does onto another object. And this, I usually describe with a straight crosshatch. Again, at the foreground, I'll make it heavy. And as it progresses back, I go light. Use different color to describe that. Cast. Form. It might be a little frustrating at first, especially with just the pen. It's very hard to describe these forms without practicing it a lot. So mess up a lot, and I expect you guys to mess up a lot, and I'll definitely correct you guys and give you a direction in terms of how you're going to apply it a little better. But I need you guys to just take that first step and just try it on paper. Other than organic forms, use geometric forms as well. So taking the cube or the pyramid itself, applying it just like I did with these circles. Find the light source and apply the cast shadow. Darkest is where the object meets the ground. And you can crosshatch this as well. Remember, one direction, it goes out, less and less. First set of homework, cubes in perspective, basic perspective 1.2 point. That's going to be about 4 pages. So 2 pages of the basic perspective 1.2 point, 2 pages of the cubes in perspective as well, and then also 2 pages of form shadows and cast shadows, taking these basic forms and the organic and geometric forms that you've already created from the week before. Follow your contours. Very important. I'm going to bring this up over and over again. Your contours are going to be very important because this will give you the direction that you're supposed to go in for your form shadows and understanding where your cast shadows are going to end up. Try not to be overly zealous with your shapes. Start real simple shapes like this. Start with these basic forms. Push into more of the organic forms that you did before, and then go from there. Remember, it's a slow process, and it can be a high learning curve, but as long as you take it step by step and you do a lot of it, because to be honest, if you're not doing the work, you're not going to learn. You have to constantly do this, and this takes a lot of dedication. It seems simple enough when I'm doing it up on the board or even on paper, but trust me, it's not one of those things where I picked up instantly. It took me a very long time to continue to just get the basics of understanding of how to apply it, mainly because you don't have a pencil, so you can't fudge some of the lines or the shading. You're restricted to a very, it's going to be hard to be confident with it, but the pen itself is not forgiving. It will kick your butt. So be patient with it, respect the pen, because I do a lot as well. If you mess up, it's okay. It's going to tell you if you mess up, but that's what we want, and that's why we use the pen in this class. So keep to these basic forms that I put up. It may seem a bit much for this week, but we need to kick it up a bit and start running with this. From here on out, we're going to continue to study line work. We're going to start to get into the other materials more, and and I'll just keep going from there. So please try to do as much as you can this week, really tackle this hard. The first 2 weeks were pretty basic because it was just basic understanding of the pen and the materials. But now we really need to start getting into understanding how to incorporate and use this stuff. The following week, we're going to start to understand how to mesh and incorporate all of the forms together, not just separately the organics and the geometrics. We're going to start to interlock them and put them together so that you'll start to understand how to build shapes and forms that describe things that we see every day. Good luck this week, and if you have any questions, of course, put it up on on your homeworks and stuff like that, and I'll get back to you. And good luck. All right. Okay, you guys, so I wanted to give you an example, just a demonstration of what I wanted to see in your books on actual paper with the pens. And again, we're not using any of the material, no marker, no white gel pen, just the Staedtler microns. This is a 0.3, and that's the one we're going to stick with. We'll go to a 0.5. We need to thicken up some of the lines. The boxes in perspective is pretty self-explanatory. I don't want to fill up this entire page. I kind of need to save the space to show you some other things. But the boxes in perspective, again, it's going to be a lot about that first warm-up that we had done with the line control, building that confidence with the line, and being able to hit your boxes in perspective with a really confident and straight line. When it comes to the basic perspective, the 1 point, 2 point, just take your one page, fill it up with just a horizon line, and just practice this. You can create a longer horizon line, do multiple perspective. It can even be 1 point perspective and have multiple points. So long horizon line, create multiple vanishing points. And go from there. Now I'd like to see 2 pages of this, 2 pages of your boxes in perspective. Now those ones you don't have to create your horizon line, no vanishing point. You just create boxes. You're eyeing your perspective, going into any vanishing point. And just repeatedly create boxes in space. Now again, I'm sketching kind of quick. You don't have to draw as fast. Slow down a bit. Pace yourself. Think ahead before you put down your line. If you start randomly creating your shapes, you'll start to make things a bit cluttered, not too well organized, and it's just going to be a jumbled mess. So you have to think ahead. If you don't know where you're going, stop, observe, and start over, or just continue on just at a slower pace. So alter your boxes, make them small, have them increase in scale and size. You can have them take up way more space. And you can have them flow in a certain direction. It can almost look like a landscape. From here, you can also think about applying some of your shadows. Cast shadow coming down. And you don't have to fill up the entire space or all the boxes in perspective, with shadow. You can just pick a certain area and start to flesh it out from there, just to practice. But again, you can see where I'm going with this. Pretty simplistic, but it's a good exercise. Fill the entire page. The second part of your homework, so 2 pages of the basic perspective, 1.2 point, 2 pages of your boxes in perspective. Let's do 2 more pages of your organic forms and even geometric forms, and playing with your form shadows and your cast shadows. So let's go with the most basic form here, a sphere. And like I said before, you're going to look for a cast shadow. Light is coming in from one direction. Find your light source. And this is where you can start to alter and go size up with your pen, go a little darker. Find your core. You're going to go dark. Your core is going to be your darkest form shadow. And as you go out, start to fill it in with some hatching. And then going into cast shadows as well. And with your cast shadows, where the object meets the ground is your darkest dark. Then as it comes out, you vignette, cast shadow, form shadow. You can take a geometric shape, same application. So the light is coming in, find your cast shadow. Now the form shadow is not going to work as well because you have a hard, sharp angle. So I'm just going to fill up the space with some hatching, because this is going to be in shadow. But I don't want it to be as dark as my cast. So again, where the object meets the ground is going to be its darkest. And my cast shadow, I fill it in and vignette that out. So 2 pages of this. Start with the most basic form, the 5 shapes that we had covered. Start with these. And then go back to some of your organic forms and shapes you had contoured before and apply your form shadow, cast shadows. Go back into some of your boxes in perspective. You can do that in here as well. But really start to practice understanding shadow, form shadow, cast shadows, and knowing how to apply them into your shapes. No marker, no highlights just yet, just line work. Continue the practice with the pen, getting confident with it. Making sure the lines you're putting down are what you want to put down. And of course, your 1-point and 2-point perspective. These are very basic things. For those of you that do understand perspective, I'd like to see maybe, I guess if you're taking perspective before and you don't want to do this, give me a page, at least a page that you understand, and that way I'll know, okay, since you already get it, you can move on and do a lot more of the advanced stuff here. For those of you that haven't taken perspective or don't know it very well, stick to what I said, do at least 2 pages of this, repeat yourself over and over again, and create shapes in perspective using horizon lines and the vanishing points. 1-point and 2-point. So I hope this helps you guys a little bit, and keep practicing, keep going with it. Again, it's a lot of mileage and a lot of practice, so keep at it, and I'll see you guys next week.